beautiful, beautiful being. In this video, I am going to share about how to talk about sex, before, during, and after, because there are 3 different things. And also how to talk about sex with someone you are just starting a relationship with versus someone that you've already been in a relationship with for a long time. And I know. This is so hard, okay? It's so hard to talk about sex. And I'm gonna talk about why is it so hard? And we're gonna get into all of that in this video. Hi, my friend. My name is Haley Friend Wilson, and I am a certified embodiment and somatic sexuality guide, helping you to embody a fuller expression of your creativity, sexuality, and vitality. And so in this video today, we're gonna get straight into it. So first off, why? Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to talk about sex? So there are 3 reasons that it is very challenging. First is if you have grown up in any kind of culture, religion, background that has taught you that sex is bad, shameful, or wrong. And let me tell you, most of us, who hasn't, right? Who hasn't got some kind of mixed messaging? Most of us got mixed messaging that sex is bad, shameful, and wrong / is glorified in the media, right? So there's a lot of confusion. And then reason number 2 is without a lot of education. Most of us were never educated about how to discover your body, how to discover your pleasure, how to explore pleasure with somebody else, how to talk about that. So lack of education. And then number 3, if you've had any kind of sexual trauma, and I just want to normalize right now that sexual trauma is not just a female-bodied thing. This happens to men. This happens to trans people. This happens to non-binary people. Regardless of your gender identity, sexual trauma, sexual abuse, sexual violation happens to everybody. So I really want to normalize that because it's really time that we have more of a conversation around that this is something that people of any gender identity experience and do experience. And if you have experienced that or your partner has experienced that, it can make it incredibly hard to talk about sex because I know for me personally, in my experience, one of the reasons this has been so hard for my entire life is that there's a freeze response, okay? There's a freeze response. Oftentimes, if you have had a history of sexual trauma that comes up automatically, and it can make it hard to communicate. And so I'm going to talk about how this is actually going to be a separate video that I create around how to heal from sexual trauma, how to transform sexual trauma. But just that to say, it can make it really hard to talk about sex if you have experienced sexual trauma, if you're prone to disassociation. So this is where you just get to be very super gentle with yourself, okay? Super, super gentle with yourself. I'll say it again. Be gentle. Be so gentle. Be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with your partner. This topic is really loaded. And so just have compassion for yourself. Have compassion with your partner that this is something that most of us were not raised with any kind of good messaging, with any kind of good education. And we probably had some kind of negative experience or our partner has. And so this is where you just get to take a deep breath and say, okay, where are we at right now? And the beautiful thing is that this is a skill. This is a skill that can be learned. So that's what we're going to do right now. The first thing that you want to do approaching this topic of how to talk about sex is to frame the conversation. So usually maybe you're the person in the relationship that's like, hey, actually really, this is important to me. Or maybe you're not even in a relationship yet, but you're preparing, or whatever it is. So usually one person in the relationship is like, okay, I want to talk about this. And maybe the other person, you're not sure how they're going to take it or how they're going to handle that. Or maybe you're the one that's doing the research because they're like, hey, I want to talk about sex. And you're like, I don't know. Either way, you want to frame the conversation in a light, fun, playful, way, because we can get way too serious about this topic. And honestly, our erotic energy does not like seriousness. It likes playfulness. It likes lightheartedness. And this should be an arena of life that we can feel the ability to play, to explore, to be curious. And so it can take just some training to put ourselves in that mode of like, all right, how can I just let this be fun? And I really want to encourage any of you who is not in a relationship yet, or you are just starting to relationship yet, bake this in. Bake in talking about sex from the beginning, because it is much more challenging if you have already been in an established relationship with someone for some time and you've already established that you don't talk about sex. Is just something that like it happens when it happens and you don't really talk about it. You don't talk about it before, you don't talk about it during, you don't talk about it after. And I'm telling you from personal experience, it's much harder to shift that dynamic once it's already been established. It is possible, and I'm going to talk about that. But for those of you who are just starting in your relationship, this is the way that you can frame the conversation. So you can say, hey, I'm loving getting to know you. So, this is one way that this conversation could look. If you are just in the beginning stages of getting to know someone, you could say something to the effect of, hey, I'm really loving getting to know you and our connection together. And I would really love to experience a lot of juiciness, play, authenticity, shared pleasure together. And I know that an important thing to creating that is communicating. So I would love if we could take some time to talk about our sex together, our sexual life. Would you be willing to take some time and some space to have that conversation with me? And so this is a really great gauge to if this person, first of all, is worth your time and is worth your energy. And also because if they based on how they respond, right? If they're like, we don't need to talk about it. Is that's gonna be a red flag, because if you are seriously interested in this person and you are wanting something that is long term, in order to have a sex life that sustains and only gets better and is a beautiful thing for both of you to experience, you've got to talk about sex. You got to talk about it. And if you're not comfortable talking with this person about sex, that is also a good indicator that you probably shouldn't be having sex with this person. If you're not even comfortable to have a conversation, okay? So that's one thing. Second thing is, if you've already been in an established relationship, so right, you've already been in an established relationship and this has not been habitually something that you all do, you can say something to the effect of like, hey, love, focusing on the positive. I love how much we bond over this or that. Like, I love our hikes together and how close I feel to you when we're out in nature. I love when we're jamming out musically or whatever it is that you do together already. That's really a solid way that you connect. Focus on that, how much you love that, and then say, and I would really love for us to feel that kind of synergy sexually. And I know there's more. I know there's more pleasure that we could experience. And I would love to experience more pleasure, experience more intimacy with you. I would love to know, what could feel better, what I could do better. I would love to talk about my desires and my curiosities. Like, would you be willing to have that conversation with me? Also, see how that lands, right? That's going to be good information. And so once you put it out there, once you've established, give it enough time in advance for the person to prepare, and then say, let's have this conversation in a fun, lighthearted environment that we both can really focus and be present with each other and show up to this conversation feeling relaxed. And so really set the stage, give each other time, and then especially if you've already been in a relationship for a long time, say, hey, I was thinking we could both just have some days in advance to prepare for this conversation and think about what we love, what's going really well, what could go better, so that we can both be really honest in this conversation. And I want to just set off from the bat that neither of us are going to take it personally, any kind of feedback, because the goal here is to give and receive more pleasure and to deepen our intimacy together. And so just set that stage, and also set the stage of, I would love if this conversation could be active listening. So what that looks like is repeating back in your own words what the other person says. And you can say, that would help me feel heard. And that will also make me know that I'm hearing you and that I'm understanding you. Can we use principles of active listening in this conversation? That way you've already set the space, right? You've set the stage that you're going to do it in a time that you both agree on, that you've both prepared for the conversation, that it's a fun, free environment that you can also both focus, is free of distractions, kids, or whatever. The other thing is not in a cafe or something that feels awkward, like good environment. And that you're going to use active listening to have it be a dynamic conversation, right? So setting the stage is huge. And I just want to say, this is so worth your time, people, to put your energy into learning these skills, even though it might feel crunchy or awkward in the beginning, because there was actually a study done by the Journal of Personal and Social and Personal Relationships that people with open sexual communication had a higher relationship satisfaction. And y'all know, like, when you've been having good sex and you've had good sex, is you're happier in the relationship, right? But if the sex is not going well and you don't know how to talk about it, that is going to be a Achilles heel to your relationship. It really is. And so this is something that is worth your time and energy, y'all, okay? So after you've established the time and place, you're going to do it. You're going to have the talk. Start with what's going well. Start with what you love. Start with what they do that feels really good, that turns you on. We want to start with that, okay? That's going to set a really positive, sexy mood for the talk. And both share like what you love. I love it when you kiss me here. I love it when you like whisper these things in my ears. I love whatever it is. Talk about what you love. Then from there, really go into what could be better, like, but not from a criticism place. So I'm going to talk about what this should not look like. So what this should not look like is like, I really don't like it when you, or like, I wish you would stop, da da da, or like, you really don't know how to, da da da. Like, that's gonna shut someone down, because honestly, like this world of sexuality is so vulnerable. It's so vulnerable. It's so easy to start to feel defensive. It's so easy to like have your guards come up, to feel rejected, to feel judged, right? So just ease in, right? So when you're talking about what could be better, talk about it from I point, from the I standard. I'm not like, you don't do this. Like, no, hey, I notice that when this is happening, I feel my body shutting down, or actually this position really doesn't feel great for me. Or I notice that when we're making love and this starts to happen, I disassociate. Or, whatever it is, just talk about your personal experience, what's happening for you, and use I statements. And so if you don't even know what you want or what could be better, being vulnerable is so sexy. So saying something to the effect of like, honestly, I don't even really know what I want. I don't even really know what I like. Would you be willing to be in a process of exploration with me? And I know this is super vulnerable. And the thing about being vulnerable and making a request like that is that you also have to understand the other person might say, no. They might say, I don't really have the bandwidth for that right now, or I don't really feel comfortable. I don't know what that would look like. And so prepare yourself for also maybe those feelings of rejection that might come up, and know that you can always explore your body, and you should explore your body. You should absolutely explore your body by yourself, because how are you going to know what you like if you haven't taken some time to explore what feels good, what rhythm, what pace, where on your body, doing some pleasure mapping practices. If you don't know what that is, there's some videos on that. I'm also going to create more videos around how specifically to explore sexually in an embodied way, listening to the signals of your body. That's going to be an upcoming video very soon. So if you don't know, just know you can always explore for yourself or be vulnerable, ask to explore with somebody else. So if you're in this process of exploring, what this can look like in terms of communication is talking about what you want to explore before you explore it. And let this be fun, let this be creative, let this be dynamic. So this can be like, for instance, for me in this situation, when I was at a place where I was really ready to explore, I was with a partner at the time that was very communicative. We had already established communication in our sexuality as a regular part of how we connected in our partnership. And so I was interested in exploring more role play. And so we talked about a role play scenario beforehand and talked it out. Okay, what could this scene look like? What kind of props or what things could be present? And let it be fun and playful. And that also helps it to ensure that exploration is going to go better if you've already talked about what it can look like and what are your safe words that you're going to say if it's happening and it's not going well. Because this is one thing that you want to understand if you are in a process of exploration, that might mean that as you're in that process of exploration, there might be some things that happen that don't feel good, where you're like, that's a no. Okay, like I know I've experienced that. I was like, okay, try that. Now, that's clear. I do not want that. And so don't let that be too much of a problem. Don't make it that. Be able to celebrate that for yourself, celebrate that for the other person. Like, oh good, we learned. Like, that's part of the process. When we're exploring, we learn what we like, we learn what we don't like. Don't let it be like too heavy, right? Okay, so then from there, also another thing is in this process of exploration, how to then take this conversation. This is the bridge, y'all. So now we're in the bridge to communicating outside of the bedroom and then communicating in the bedroom. So how you can begin to make that bridge to communicate when you're actually in the bedroom is role playing, communicating in the bedroom when you're not in the bedroom. So what this could look like, for instance, I'll just give you an example of like when I was thinking about this, when I was meditating about this whole topic. And for myself personally, I was like, you know what? I would really love, because communication still is hard for me, even 20 years after studying this and embodiment and sexuality, it's still a personal challenge just because of my own history around sexual trauma. I continue to get better and better, but it's still a challenge for me, and especially in the bedroom, in the acts, right? And so one of the things that I was thinking that could be fun is talking about colors. Like, okay, when I'm wanting it softer, slower, more sensual, I could say pink. And then my partner knows when I say pink, we're going to just tone it down. We're going to make it more sensual, soft. When I say red is give me more fire, give me more passion. I'm like ready for something stronger, faster, right? When I say blue, it means I need to pause. Like I'm realizing I'm disassociating or I'm not fully present or like this actually isn't feeling good. And for me, I was like, this could be a fun way to kind of help me break through. And when I don't know when I feel like I can't use full words, but maybe for you, that's not a thing. And you can just practice saying like, give it to me softer, more sensual, baby. Or give me more fire. I'm ready for it. Bring the fire, honey. Or I need a pause. Can we breathe? And so practice actually saying that with your partner. Like, okay, you're on the couch. Like, baby, let's role play. Let's role play that we're in the bedroom. And let's role play both of us communicating to each other when you're not actually having sex, but you're starting to normalize and make it natural and become more comfortable with how you would begin to communicate when you're actually in the bedroom. Okay. And what those phrases are going to be. And so you're both already accustomed to that, including in that safe words, especially if you're playing in kink and BDSM. This is essential. You need to have a safe word that you both know, that you both understand, that you're going to say if you're exploring something and then all of a sudden a trigger comes up, a memory, something, you got to say your safe word. Both know the safe word. Crucial, crucial, crucial. So, on the same vein of making the bridge around consent, is that consent doesn't always need to be verbal, okay? So, especially for someone who has a hard time verbalizing, this is going to be really essential to talk about how you can establish consent in a nonverbal way. So, of course, it can look like the head nod, like yes, or like no, or it could look like a face, like like a hesitant, like okay, we're gonna pause, you know. So you can talk about what are your nonverbal cues. Maybe it's a squeezing of the arm means stop. Maybe it's a petting of the leg means I'm all in. So you just get creative with your partner. What are your nonverbal cues around consent? Active listening. So this is where throughout the conversation, I just want to break that down for anyone who doesn't know, is basically where somebody expresses something and you say, okay, so what I'm hearing you say, and then you repeat back to them what you're hearing them say in your own words, and then clarifying, am I getting that? And this is really crucial in this conversation, that you both do this active listening and asking those clarifying questions like, am I understanding you? And really let this be fun, right? Let this be fun. And actually, this reminds me of the point around criticism or feedback, right? That's not criticism, is really take any of those gems of like, okay, what I'm hearing you say is when this happens, this doesn't feel good for you. Instead of taking that personally, if you feel like that's your fault or whatever, instead of think of this as like a golden opportunity, like a golden gem that is going to bring you closer. Like you want to know those things, right? You want to know those things that don't feel good so that you can make it feel better. And in that same vein, this is another thing around communicating in the bedroom is normalizing saying, how could this feel better? Like instead of like, does that feel good? How could this feel better? And so that you're both leaning into this like, this could always feel better. There could always be more pleasure. And normalize that phrase of like, how could this feel better, babe? How could this feel better? And really even play with like a scenario where you're out of the bedroom and somebody's just touching your arm, and say, how could this feel better? And really, if you're the receiver, really get into like, oh, actually, if you just squeeze, I want you to just squeeze and hold that. Yeah, right there. And play, normalize this play around touch and knowing that we can always evolve, because having this kind of mentality around your sexuality is really going to help you to continue experiencing more pleasure, because there is no limit, y'all. There's no limits. Okay? So the other thing that you want to do within this conversation is to, of course, talk about your sexual health. It doesn't necessarily apply if you've been monogamous with the same person for many years, but if you are newer, just normalize like, hey, I would love to talk about also in this conversation, like our sexual health, last time you got tested, all of this, to just really normalize that that's going to be part of the conversation is really, 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 really crucial. Right. The other thing you want to talk about is your boundaries. Like if you already know you are a hard no to anal sex, or you're a hard no to this or that or the other thing, whatever that is, just communicating that upfront. Like this is a boundary for me, or I don't do threesomes, or I don't do this, or I don't, like, really just get clear and communicate those boundaries with the other person and celebrate that boundary. Like, thank you. Thank you for your no. Thank you. Thank you for telling me what makes you feel good, right? This is like the place that we want to evolve into, is actually thanking the other person for those boundaries. That's going to help them feel so much safer and more open to explore with you. Then the last thing is that we want to talk about setting the scene for sex. So, what does it look like to be really conscious about setting an environment and get playful with that? Because oftentimes if, sex has fallen into a routine, especially in a long-term relationship, talk about like, how could we mix this up? How could we set a different scenario for ourselves to mix it up, right? and let that be a fun play around that. And this is actually the last point, is debriefing after the fact. Like, sometimes people like to do that right afterwards. Sometimes I like to do it right afterwards or the next day. But it's really great to just begin to normalize. Like, we talk about it. Like, how'd that go for you? That was really hot when that happened. Like, how is this? And just begin to normalize talking about sex together. And in this conversation, you can tell this to your partner, like, hey, I would really love for this to just be a normal thing that we do. We talk about sex before, we talk about it during, we talk about it after, because this is something that is really a value for me, and also something I'm really excited to grow in my sexual exploration with you. And so I want us to both feel really comfortable to talk about this together and have this be something that we can grow together. So I hope you have gained something that can support you in feeling more embodied, more connected to your sexuality, to yourself, to your partners, however you like to do it. And let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments, what is your biggest takeaway? If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, share with a friend. It really helps me. If you want more short form content, you can follow me on Instagram at Creativity as Love. Check out all my links down below. If you're interested in working with me in my Embodied Sexuality program, you can check that link below. We go all into body, mind, spirit, the whole thing of really blossoming into your full sexual expression that feels super authentic and connected to what you want and how you want to step into your full sexual self. And wishing you a beautiful, beautiful, full journey of embodying a more liberated version of yourself in your expression of your creativity, sexuality, and vitality.